Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining me today. And my name is Dr. Brenda Eckert. I'm a financial coach. I also create online courses. I'm a researcher, writer, sociologist, and my background is really divided into three different periods. I have a PhD in sociology. Unfortunately, that PhD didn't lead to a great job right away, so I've had some experience living in poverty until I could catch a break. And once I did, I built a fabulous career, even testified in front of Congress, became a national expert on elder abuse as well as financial exploitation by court-appointed guardians. That career suddenly came to an end, and I'm in this new phase, I guess one of limbo right now, as I'm hoping to sell my house and move into an RV and travel and work from the RV as I travel the country. And boy, I'm like you. I can't wait for those days to happen again. It looks like maybe months away. Anyway, after I left my career, I had to think about what I wanted to do next. And I decided that one of my passions is to help people reach financial freedom and master their finances so that when things like the end of a job happen, or like this pandemic happen, that they're in an okay situation, that they don't have to worry about their money all the time. So I graduated from the Financial Coach Academy, and my goal is to really help you take charge of your money. Before I continue, I want you to know that all of this information is for educational purposes only. I'm a coach. I work with mindsets and habits and planning and strategies and budgets. I don't provide any specific guidance for investments and portfolios and such. So today we're going to take three big action steps. Everything I do is about action. I can talk and talk, but if you're not following through, I feel like we haven't been really successful. So your first action step is going to be to ramp up your savings. The second is to take a long-range perspective and to avoid panic. And then the third is to create an emergency financial plan. And by the way, this presentation software that I have, I will give this to you, send you the preview after this webinar. You'll be able to click on all of this information yourself. So there's no reason to take notes, no reason to write any of this down. I will give this to you afterward. We got here because of COVID-19. And that is, as we all know, it's a new virus, not previously been seen in humans. And you've probably seen this chart quite a bit. It's about trying to flatten the curve. So this is the reason why we are practicing social distancing. I have a resource for you that I think is really instructive. This is from Johns Hopkins University. And if we can load it up here, this is updated every single day. And hopefully over time, we're going to be able to see things peter out and improve. But you can see the number of cases confirmed. It also allows you to see what's going on in the United States, in your home state. And I can tell you this looks a whole lot different than it did when I did my webinar a week ago, where there were a couple of hot spots and a lot of the map was empty. So this map shows where we are right now. This is my county, James City County. It's a smaller county, but we've had the first death in the state, and it is a bit of a hotbed. So you can come in here and see what's happening with wherever you live. So it's an interesting resource to go to. And so this is where we are today with our United States response in terms of the federal government. So on March 5th, there was a bill passed for vaccine research and development. That's $8.3 billion in emergency funding to treat and prevent the spread of COVID-19. Hopefully with a virus or vaccine found soon. Phase 2 was March 18th, and this really put money into paid sick leave, unemployment benefits, and then the tax deadline and tax payment dates were changed from April 15th to July 15th. One of the big things to note here, at least in this, is that the paid sick leave covered about 50% of American workers, not everyone. Now, this is where we are today. So early this morning at something like 1 a.m., a negotiation was reached between the Republican and Democratic parties to pass this stimulus emergency aid package. This is what we know about it right now. It has to get through, I think tonight it is probably going to get through the Senate, and we're waiting to find out what happens with the House of Representatives. Biggest financial bailout ever, about $2 trillion. This is what it looks like, at least preliminarily. The final information is not available yet, but there will be direct payments to individuals and families, billions for small business loans, unemployment insurance benefits, and then $500 billion in loans for distressed companies. So that's what we're looking at today. And the big question that a lot of people have is, am I going to get a check? This is what we know right now. It looks like individuals will receive a check for $1,200, $2,400 if you're doing a joint tax return. If you don't have tax liability or a very small tax liability, you'll get at least $600. Families receive an additional $500 for each qualifying child. And there's also talk about where, the income levels. So if you're making if your income was under $75,000, and I think this is probably going to be adjusted gross income, you'll get the full amount. If it's over that for an individual, you'll get a portion of that. And so at some level, you won't be eligible at all. So the details are still coming out, and I will update that as I have them. So let's talk about the first thing in this crisis that you can do, and that's going to be ramp up your savings. And I want you to think about how you respond to stress, because this is definitely an incredibly high stress situation. And there are some helpful things, and then there are not so helpful things. So one of the things you can try to do is sell things you don't use. And I'm going to say that's going to be helpful. You make a little bit of money and declutter. Waste time reading conspiracy theories. This is going to drive you nuts. It's not helpful, and it'll give you wrong information. Ignoring the entire situation. It's pretty impossible to ignore, but I know that that's a tendency of a lot of people. You're here in this webinar, and so that's a sign that you're willing to address what's going on head on. Schedule walks outdoors. Try an online yoga class. Very helpful. This is a great time to explore side hustles, especially if you are working from home or you're home all day, or your hours have been cut. Maybe you've even lost your job. This is the time to look to see what's available in terms of how you can use your skills to make some money on the side. Buy stuff you don't need online. That's retail therapy, and I know that that is really going to break your budget, at least right now. So definitely not helpful. Drowning your sorrows in wine may be helpful temporarily, but over the long run, it's not going to help you. Lose sleep from worrying, but refuse to address the problem. And I think all of us are losing sleep, and all of us are worrying. But partly why I believe so much in planning is it does lower the stress level. It does lower the amount of worrying, because you feel like you're at least trying to take as much control over something that you don't have control over. And you're coming up with plan A, B, and C. So if you're not addressing the problem, it's not helpful. Working on your cooking skills, making meals, definitely that's great. A lot of you are probably living in a lot cleaner, a lot more organized houses these days. So those are sort of the ways that we typically respond to stress. And as you think about your stress responses, think about whether it's helpful or not very helpful. So What do you do if your paycheck ends, or maybe you end up in the hospital and you have those high medical costs? This is the part that frightens everybody. And well before this crisis, about half of Americans said they live paycheck to paycheck. They lose one paycheck, and can they pay the rent? Can they buy groceries? Can they pay the bills? 69% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. So many people are ill prepared to handle what we are in the midst of right now. So in terms of how prepared you are, one of the things that I talk about is just checking out your net worth. You know, what are your assets and what are your liabilities? This is really not that difficult. And when I give you this download, this preview, you'll be able to download this Google Sheet and actually fill this out yourself. But what this does is it gives you everything that you need to see on one page. And the real value of this in a crisis is that you can begin to see where your assets are. You can also see where your liabilities are. So for instance, there look to be some breaks on student loans, 0% interest for a certain amount of time. There may be some ways that some companies are going to defer payments, waive mortgage interest, for instance. So it allows you to see everything in one place and begin to think about where you're going to draw your funds from. Hopefully you've got some funds. But also, you know, which liabilities can you hold off on? If you can only pay 2 bills, which 2 bills is it going to be? So this is something that I ask you as a good starting point, is to just get a handle on where your money is and how much it is. So if you need to have emergency funds, where do you go? Where do you get them from? Your first choice is going to be cash and checking and savings accounts, CDs, maybe a home equity loan or line of credit. If you've got credit card cashback options, this might be a good time to cash it in. These are all things that are pretty easily accessible. There are no penalties for withdrawing early. So that's your first tier of where to tap into for your funds. A second tier might be maybe you've got a credit card balance and perhaps the credit card company is willing to drop that to 0% for a certain time, or a credit card is offering 0% balance transfer options that you have to look at seriously now. Whereas, you know, maybe before you ignored it. Maybe now it's time to look at that. Store cards, if you have a family member or someone, you might have to think about getting a personal loan. Check your employer. They may have some type of loan or some type of financial hardship offerings. Also, your Roth IRA, if you've been contributing to that, and you can withdraw your contributions as long as they've been in there for 5 years or more. And in fact, I think that Congress is looking at eliminating some of those penalties for taking out your IRA earlier. So again, you know, you hate to tap into your retirement funds. We're talking about, you know, if you're really in a jam. There are also some websites that do peer-to-peer lending, so you might be able to get a loan from another person through those websites. 401k, check it out to see if you can take a loan from that, but be warned that typically you have to pay it back before you leave the company or before you lose your job at that company. So it's not ideal. And I'm going to put this on the table, a college fund. If you've got $20,000 there for junior to go to college and you're having a tough time, you don't know how you're going to pay the mortgage. Okay, you might need to take some of the money out of that college fund. This is more important, and college can be paid for later. And you have to really think through these options, but don't take everything, don't take it off the table. The third choice is something I even hate to include here because it's really predatory lending, incredibly high interest rates, terrible options. But if, you know, these are title loans and payday loans, if you're having problems putting food on the table, that's That's where you go to. So again, you know, if you can stick to your first choice options, go there first. That's the way to go. So the action you're going to want to take is to accelerate your emergency savings. And if you have a paycheck right now, you are in a very good place to do this, and you're going to go as fast as you possibly can. So there are two pieces of this equation. One is you're going to cut expenses, and the second is you're going to hopefully grow your income and save what's left over here. So the biggest impact is generally going to be coming from those big three expenses, which is housing, transportation, and food. And some of this you're already doing because the restaurants are closed. So you're really stuck preparing your own food. You know, maybe there's some takeout options, but with the stay-at-home orders in many states, you're going to be preparing your own food. That will save you money if you're used to eating out. Entertainment, certainly almost everything that we had planned to go to in the next month, in the next 2 months, have been canceled. So your entertainment might now be Netflix. So you're probably saving money there. Some of the other ways that you can cut those expenses, or look at what you're subscribing to, and the subscriptions that you're not using. If you're still paying for satellite TV, see if you can get other options like the Roku or the Apple Fire Plus. Downsize your car, or maybe you have a second car sitting in the garage that you seldom use. Free up that money. I've got used public transportation, but a lot of public transportation is now shut down as well. I guess you're stuck using your bicycle to get around. And then refinance rates, mortgage rates, refinance rates are at a very low level, their lowest perhaps in maybe ever. So if you might want to look at refinancing your house to bring your mortgage levels down and free up some cash. So now, growing your income, if you have a position and you're qualified for overtime, this might be the time to put in some more hours. Hopefully you're feeling well enough to be able to do that. Grabbing a part-time job if you can, hopefully one that is not going to jeopardize your ability to do social distancing, and also really look for online opportunities, you know, getting a side hustle online. So you're going to do both of those things. And this is really a race at this point, unless you've already stashed away, say, 6 months of emergency savings. You're going to race, you're going to accelerate those emergency savings, taking the money diet. So you're only going to pay for those essentials for a month, you know, and you may already be there. Just cut out all the extraneous stuff and see how much you really need as your base budget. Sell stuff you don't need. Maybe you can rent out a room or part of your house. If you are contributing to your retirement, this might be a good time to halt or lower those contributions and divert it into emergency savings. You might transfer credit card balances to low introductory rates. Really, but all of these things, you know, keep in mind to practice social distancing. So if you're renting out part of a house, you know, how can you do that safely? So keep those in mind, but you're going to try to accelerate that emergency savings as fast as you can. And a lot of the resources that I have here are on my website. And so if you go to this, you can download a lot of different resources on your own time. So I'm providing also that link you will find in the preview. And then you know, also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has some basic advice on what to do if you're having trouble paying your bills and maybe contacting your lenders. So you might want to, you know, check out this information as well. Also, a lot of local counties are starting to, if you've got a small business, for instance, they may have grants or small business loans available to you. There are still social services are operating, so if you need help, you know, you want to check with your local county, your local jurisdiction. Part 2 is don't panic. And so I looked at my retirement accounts today, and oh my, yes, not very pretty. And the first thing is, oh no, I just lost, 20% of my savings, 30% of my savings, whatever it is. What should I do? And the first inclination is, oh my gosh, I've got to sell. I've got to get out of stocks. The first inclination is panic. And you can see here what's happened with this giant plummet in the stock market. The Dow Jones down 28% from February over to March. And so here we are. This is looking pretty awful. But if we look at this in perspective, I think you'll feel a little bit better. So if we're looking at globally, the world epidemics and the global stock market, you'll see an upward trend. And you have various outbreaks. This is the Ebola, which many of us remember. That was probably the biggest thing that dropped the stock market down, but even then it was a little dip. And yes, we're definitely going to be going down worldwide, but if you look at this big picture, it shows some promise. Market volatility, this is the jumps that you're seeing from day to day. So you can see as you have these lower levels, there's not a lot of market volatility, and we've been pretty good since the recession of 2008, 2009. You can see how that peaked, and we're right back to those incredible roller coaster rides in the stock market. So that is something that I think we're going to see over the next several months, is that roller coaster. And again, over time, we hope that it evens out, but that helps you see where we are in terms of a longer range perspective. So one of the things that you can do is check your portfolio. So I'm talking especially your retirement portfolio. Where is your money in terms of risk? The lowest risk is money markets and cash. You're not making much money. There's very little return on there, but the money is generally safe. And you move up a bit on the risk level when you move into bonds. Again, you've got some returns. Risk level generally tends to be, a little bit moderate, but pretty low. And real estate intangibles, I think a lot of people have relied on this since the, rebound of the housing market in 2010, 2011. But, as someone now who's trying to sell her house, there's no guarantee that that you can trade in that house for cash. So again, this is getting to be on the higher risk level, especially if you are a landlord and suddenly you have tenants who can't pay the rent. And at the higher level of risk are stocks or equities. So one of the things you can do is look at your portfolio. How much do you have in stocks? How much in cash? And then, are you comfortable with this? Now, one of the things that you may have seen, and you may have done this yourself, is that you filled out a questionnaire to assess your risk tolerance. So maybe you have a financial advisor, maybe you've done this online. So it says, okay, you've got $100,000 and the stock market just, went down 10%. You've lost $10,000. What do? Do you pull it out? Do you maintain? Do you invest more? And what they have found is that the answer that you give on that very hypothetical questionnaire has actually nothing to do with your behavior. So some of the people who say, well, I'd write it out, are those very people who panic and they pull out their funds. So you can't count on that measure to assess what your level of risk should be. And partly it's, risk tolerance, it's a very psychological, multidimensional trait. It's really driven by our emotions. So if you've spent, this morning looking at, researching and reading up all about, what's coming next and really get worried about it, you can feel your emotions start to pull you towards that panic level. So you may do things that theoretically you didn't think you'd be doing, 6 months ago or even 2 months ago. So there's two common strategies to allocate your resources. Probably the easiest of these is to take 120 minus your age, and that's generally the amount recommended that you hold in stocks. So if you're 30 years old, 90% in stocks, 50, 70%. If you're 70 years old, they still recommend 50% in stocks, and that, you know, may or may not be too aggressive for you. So it's a little bit arbitrary. I don't know that that is exactly works that well in today's age, but it is a loose measure of one strategy to allocate your resources. The other, the one that I use, the one that I like, is really the bucket strategy, because the focus is on when you may need that cash. So the money that I think I'm going to need in 5 years, I'm going to hold those in low risk assets, maybe some CDs, savings accounts, maybe some bonds. But if I know that I may need that, I'm going to go with a lower risk. The next basket is for money that I may need in 5 to 9 years. And maybe I'm going to add a little bit of real estate, more bonds. And then for the funds that I don't think I need for 10 or more years, it's okay to keep those at a high risk level. So that's a strategy that can help you think about how you should align your risks with, you know, when you need the money. Question now is, what do? You know, if you've seen your retirement portfolio go down, what do you do? So one of the options is to do nothing and ride it out, and that's what we recommend. It's generally things will improve, and hopefully you have the time to ride it out. Second option is you're going to time the market. You're going to sell now, and then with hopes that, okay, I'm going to sell it, things are going to crash, and then I'm going to know when it's going to crash. I'm going to buy in, then it's going to go up, and I'm going to make gobs of money. Well, none of us has a crystal ball. It's very risky. So that's very few people manage timing the market. Third option is to sell all your stocks. I'm just going to sell it all. I'm going to put it in cash because then I know I have access to it. If you do that, you've just locked in all your losses. All of, you know, this is a paper loss until you sell. When you sell, it's a real loss. So again, we're going to try to do nothing to ride it out. That's the preference here. And you know, Warren Buffett at this point is probably you know, happy to see some of the market go down. He's probably buying. So, you know, when other people are buying, that's the time to be cautious. People are selling, which is now, that's the time to maybe buy in. But that's, again, you know, Warren Buffett, who probably has a couple of billion on the side that he can invest in. Let's go to the third part, and this is what I want to focus on: creating that emergency financial plan. This is something that can help you sleep at night. It's really that basic, and this is the time for planning. You're getting a lot of information out there, and so am I. I'm trying to piece things together as best I can. My focus is to look on what the public health experts, the MDs, the professionals advise, rather than what the politicians tell us. So from that perspective, you know, we might be looking at the next 4 to 6 months of more social distancing. The virus gets reintroduced. We contain it, and we go back and forth on this for the next 4 to 6 months. And so, I mean, certainly I'm in Virginia. The schools have closed for the rest of the year. So that's, you know, into June already. So I think that may be realistic unless we find a fast vaccine for this. So, and people are talking about the next 12 to 18 months of being in a pretty deep recession with high unemployment and occasional outbreaks of the coronavirus. And again, a lot will depend on how fast we can find a vaccine or find some treatment, and how fast we can get it out and get it to the people who need it. So that's the time frame that we're looking at. And this was as of last week, where nearly 1 in 5 households has already lost work, and especially in the service industry. Those folks are incredibly hard hit. Now, I hope you're still here with me, because one of the things we need to do is just take a deep breath, focus on today, be mindful of where we are, try to be grateful, and not get so caught up in the news every day. And I know it's incredibly difficult, and one of the things that we really have to do at this point is prioritize our physical and mental health. And I know we're here talking about money, but your physical and mental health is number one. And so if you can try to meditate or get some exercise, play around with different recipes, limit the screen time, at least in terms of what you're looking at in terms of the coronavirus news. Try to connect with family and friends through video calls. You can read a lot of the libraries. If you don't have ebooks through your library, you can certainly get an account and download books for free. Maybe you've got a hobby that you haven't played with for a while. Now's the time to dust that off. Even binge watching your favorite series. I find myself watching old episodes of Friends these days. I'm not much of a TV watcher. So anyway, there are things that you can do. Keep a gratitude journal if you wanted to, write. This is the time to do it. I included the in here. It's a superhero checklist. This is part of my online course on financial freedom, but I'm including it here because it has some nice advice. So one of these is to use mindfulness. You create a powerful morning routine. So start the day off on a positive note. If you worry a lot, especially, make that to-do list before you go to sleep. Dedicate part of a time every week to achieving your goals. So there are all kinds of tips in here. Don't forget to reward yourself, surround yourself with positivity that I think are especially critical in today's age. So how do you create an emergency financial plan? I've got 5 steps, and this may sound overwhelming. I'm just going to give you a quick summary because I have the template that you can follow, and that template has all the links in it that you need to create your own emergency financial plan. Okay, so we've got 5 steps, and I don't know about you, but I feel better looking at animals, dogs and cats and birds, and eases my stress level. So money is a stress item for many people. So I've got some cute animal pictures. Hopefully you'll equate taking an inventory with a cute cat. So your first step is to really know your starting point. And so that's by calculating your net worth. What do you own and what do you owe? So the other thing I recommend is, if you are the one handling all of the finances, and if you fall ill, does your partner or does somebody, the trusted person, have the ability to log into your accounts and keep track and manage the finances? So if not, you want to start recording that login information and make sure that a partner or trusted person can manage those accounts. Step number 2 is something that you might be undertaking right now. Estimate your core expenses. So you're going to look at what you've spent maybe in the last month. What did you spend that was because you wanted to? What did you spend because you needed to? So you're going to come up with a core budget on just those basic necessities. And then you're just going to do some calculations, and this is not going to be hard. You're going to start with your core budget to determine how much money you need to cover, say, 1 to 6 months in terms of your expenses. You're going to look at your assets and see what you have available to you. And then you're going to do a basic division to see how many months or weeks, I hope not days, that you can afford to live on your current net worth, your current assets. Step 4 is where you're really going to begin to take steps to boost those cash reserves as fast as you can. So you're going to divert funds into savings accounts. You're going to try to boost that amount really fast. And this is going to depend on where you are now. If you've got a full-time job or if you've just been laid off, certainly you don't have as much ability as somebody who's still getting that nice paycheck. Make your plan. Write down your emergency savings goal, include a date, and then come up with action steps. So those are the 5 steps. This is the time to really think outside the box, explore all those options, really take charge of your finances as best as you can. I know these are uncertain times, but do your best to manage at least where you are, and you'll find that your level of anxiety and stress should go down, and that will feed into better health. So this is the Google Doc that I'm going to give you, and it talks about different types of emergencies, such as a prolonged illness or the loss of a job. And it walks you through these steps. You're going to be able to click on the resources so you can do your own net worth. This is a place for you to record, where you're logging into. The step 2 is you're just going to do look at your trimmed down expenses. So you're going to look at, what my expenses are now or what they might have been a month ago, and then your basic core expenses. You're going to write down the steps you're going to take to really slash your expenses. A couple of resources for you. This is a Google Sheet, and this is a little guide on how you might cut down those big 3 expenses. Step 3, you're just going to do some basic calculations. You're going to write in your core expenses, multiply that by 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, so you know how much you would need to last, say, for 6 months. Then you're going to put down some of your assets, and these are going to be, somewhat, these are going to be things that you might have access to. So you're going to figure out, what are my total assets, at least in these items, and then how many months is it going to cover. So I've given you examples. You're going to boost your cash reserves. So if you still have a paycheck, I'm offering some immediate steps that you might want to take. If your job is at risk, your hours are cut, or you face unemployment, you might want to look at these steps. And then I want you to take actions, and I want you to take actions soon. So this is Wednesday. Let's say tomorrow or by the end of Friday, you've taken, 1 or 2 steps, even if it's as simple as exploring the options offered by your employer. Is a 401k loan possible? Are there any resources that they have that they can offer you? And I really want you to take an action. So here's a couple of examples. Tomorrow I'm going to go online. I'm going to halt my contributions to my retirement and college funds. I'm going to take that amount, automatically put it into my savings account. And again, this is not going to hurt your retirement and college funds, in the long term. What you need to do now is shift your thinking to the next 6 months. So if you find it's in your savings account, and after 6 months, gear up your contributions back when the economy and our situation is a little bit more stable. I've offered some links here. There's some really, really wonderful resources on side hustles. I've included Side Hustle Nation, Side Hustle School, and then I have a document, I call it the Side Hustle Navigator, so that you can walk through, what are my skills? What am I good at? What sorts of, maybe there are 3 things that I could try to do to make some money, preferably online. So you can do those types of things. So I've given you space to type in what your actions are going to be and how much you want that to boost your savings. So this is really the time to take action, and to take action fast. And again, I will give this to you right after this webinar is finished so that you have access to all of these live links. How can I get more help? So if you want personalized help, first of all, there's my Facebook group on financial preparedness. It's free. I try to provide up-to-date information. I add resources, tips, sometimes some special offers, but go ahead, join my Facebook group on financial preparedness. It's a very easy way to get a little bit of extra help. As of this morning, I now have an emergency financial planning page. So I'm going to invite you to check that out. You'll be able to see that I'm offering a number of free resources and then some personalized planning options. But that's available for you to explore. And I've started offering strategy sessions and workshops. And I'm waiving my usual rates. I'm trying to make this affordable for everybody by giving you different options. One of these is if you have some specific questions, you can ask me up to 3 questions, your major concerns or issues. We can get on the phone or teleconference and we can talk about it for half an hour, and hopefully I can help give you some guidance on those items. I'm also offering one-on-one strategy sessions. So I'm going to work with you on your particular financial situation. We'll come up with an emergency financial plan. We'll try to identify resources to you, and those are hourly sessions that I have available to you. Next week, I'm launching my first set of virtual workshops. And again, I know there's a lot of urgency here. So these are going to be, I'm going to do 2 90-minute sessions. This is limited to 8 people. So there's going to be morning sessions and then evening sessions. So you can sign up for either the morning or the evening. It's going to be held on Tuesday and Thursdays. And I'm going to walk the first day. We're going to talk about where you are today. And the second session, we're really going to gear up on what you need to do to get to the point where your emergency savings is where you need it to be. So everything's very action oriented. With all of these plans, you're going to come up with your own emergency financial plan. And currently I'm working on developing an online self-paced course. So that will also be an option for you that you can take on your own time. If you're eager, you could probably complete it in a day. I've got the 5 steps. You can complete it in 5 days. It's all up to you, but I'm going to give you all of the resources you need to do your own emergency financial plan. So that information, I will send it to you as it becomes available. If there's any way that I can be of assistance, please email me. I know that these are difficult times. I will try to do the best that I can to help you through this. And if there's anything I can do, please email. Thank you very much for